Thank you all so much for joining me in this session. I hope you all enjoyed the keynote happened just now. So one thing that sticks well with me from the keynote is when Mike from Forrester talked about the AI adoption for enterprise. You know, having been working in both enterprise search and enterprise AI, I can totally see how challenging it was for an AI solution to go from a Jupyter notebook to, say, a corporation cloud, for example. But today, we see companies like Lucidworks bring exciting development around this. So I'm really looking forward to what's next, and I think you should too. All right. So to keep the momentum going, let's talk about one relatively new feature of Fusion, which is the rules engine. So just a quick note, the rules engine is actually the backend power for the predictive merchandiser that Will just mentioned in the keynote. So if you're interested in more details or want a demo for the predictive merchandiser, definitely find us in the Lucidworks booth and ask for a demo. Okay, so I used to be a data scientist myself. So when we talk about search, things like machine learning would always come to mind first. However, after I worked in the rules engine, I realized sometimes rule-based approach just can leverage certain information in such a way that things like machine learning just can't do that well, at least yet. So I hope at the end of this session, you will also find how powerful Fusion's rules engine is. So let's go through the agenda today real quick. First, let's talk about both machine learning and rule-based approaches for AI, and see when the rule-based system can actually win. And then let's take that idea to focus on what it means for search, right? And then we'll also look at how Fusion Rules Engine came to be. From there, after a general introduction about the rules engine, we'll dive into some specific examples to see how the rule engine works. And after seeing some examples, I imagine you guys want to see how things are implemented underneath the hood. So we'll talk about that as well. And finally, let's talk about some areas that we would like to focus in the future, followed by me taking some questions from you guys, okay? So, like I said, nowadays when we talk about AI, we often think about things like random forest, XGBoost, or some other fancy ensemble network models, or neural networks, right? However, there are many scenarios where we can achieve our goals by using something a lot less complicated and a lot more intuitive. Unlike things like machine learning algorithms, where we often need a large amount of training data and often end up with things or models that we can't fully interpret. Rule-based system is a great alternative AI approach in terms of how to make search better. It's because it's quick to implement, it's easy to understand and maintain, and it's also more accessible for non-technical users, right? So for today's specific example or topic, search is one area that rule-based approach works really well in terms of improving our search experience. So here's the question. What it means to have a good search experience? I think simply it means users can find what they're looking for right away. without having to go through, say, 20 pages of the search result or having to look at a bunch of irrelevant items along the way, right? Imagine if you are looking for or shopping for a new iPhone. You go to some e-commerce website, you put in iPhone. Often, not only do we see phones in the search result, we also see things like phone cases, screen protectors, or some random Hello Kitty key charms. And then you just wonder, why can't I have a clean result? So I can focus on things I'm looking for and hopefully do a purchase and then just be done with it, right? So now, from the business perspective, we often, from a user's queries, understand what their intent is. We understand when a user put in iPhone, he probably is more interested to see the actual phones than some accessories. Or when a user put in the word Apple to see Apple product, she probably also doesn't mean to see something with the word Mac in the description field instead, right? And so this kind of information or business knowledge is often pretty easy to gain from things like customer interaction or user behavior research. And once we have this kind of useful information, obviously we want to somehow leverage it to make the search experience better for our customers. So how do we help the customer on a search platform using the business logic that we just talked about? I think one common way here is through the queries a user is putting in. So here we want to somehow combine the business logic with the user queries to produce better search results, right? And to do this, we can take the raw query and then apply the business logic on top of it in the form of rules. And then eventually we will produce some optimized new query that will help the user to find what they're looking for faster. So now we can see how business rule utilization is actually a query rewriting practice. And as you can imagine, rewriting a query is actually not that simple because often we need to directly interact with the search engine at a pretty technical level, right? So such practice often requires us to directly write some code or at least modify some code. But imagine if you are a business partner who just left a meeting with a customer and then you realize some business rule can solve an important problem. However, you can't just go right into the search engine and then implement the rule because simply you may not have a great deal of technical knowledge, right? And now this implementation process becomes quite slow because you need to submit a ticket and then wait for the software engineer to be available, and then he will look at it and then hopefully implement the rule correctly for you. And furthermore, such practice makes it really difficult to see what rule is being used or what the rule is actually doing. So here on the left is some actual real JavaScript that was used in some production environments to perform some boost logic or boosting rules. And you can see how difficult it is to just by a quick glance to tell what it does. So what would be ideal is something on the right where we can see all the rules in place very easily, and also to create a new one with a little effort, right? So this is one of the many things we hope to do with Fusion Rules Engine. Here is the general idea. On the left, you have the user query, and then at the end, you have the document collection that the search is going to hit at the end. Or in a specific e-commerce case, it could be a list of product in your inventory, right? So in between, Fusion Rules Engine provides a couple of ways to do the query rewriting we just mentioned. And more specifically, we implemented 2 query pipeline stages, which are applied rule stage and the text tagger stage. So going into details, the applied rule stage provides rules based on pretty much pure business logic. Through extensive research on many use cases, we so far have identified a bunch of rule types that is pretty common during the business logic implementation for our customers. So later on, I'm going to use the Berry rule as an example to show you how this stage works. And on the other hand, the text tagger stage. So here is something really important. Although I set the stage that rule-based approach is the foundation of Fusion Rules Engine, text tagger stage actually provides a way for us to integrate some of the Fusion machine learning job output into the rule utilization pretty seamlessly. And later on, I'm going to use the synonym rule as an example to unpack this concept. So for the next couple of slides, I'm going to go through the 2 examples I just mentioned. But if you see any of the rule types here that relate better with your specific use cases, feel free to come talk to me after the session for more details. Now, recall the iPhone versus accessory scenario. This is something quite similar. Imagine a user who's looking for a new speaker system. So he goes to some website and types in Bose. Maybe he has a pretty good budget, right? And as a business owner, you may have the knowledge about your product list that there are some music CDs that also have the word Bose mentioned a couple of times in some indexed field. And so you see the potential result or the possibility that these music CDs might also show up following this query or the query of Bose. So in this case, you may want to bury or lower the rank of such irrelevant result in order to, what's that sound? Oh, that's gone. Okay, awesome. In order to keep the user on track, to focus on the thing he's actually interested to buy, right? So how do we do this? In Fusion Rules Engine, we can define a Berry rule using a simple UI. So here, you only need to define a search term as a trigger of this rule. So the trigger here is another concept I'm going to unpack later. But now just know that we can define the search term as a trigger for this rule. And then in this specific case, we can define CD as the value of, say, a index field called class that might distract the user. So once we have such Berry rule created, what can we do? So this is before we apply the Berry rule. As the user put in the query word or the term Bose, on the first result page, you can see that the music CD actually shows up at the 4th place, which for an irrelevant result, it's actually pretty high up, right? And now, after we apply the Berry rule, on surface, the query is still the same. The user just put in Bose. But then now look at the first result page. Everything is pretty tightly related to the concept of speaker. So from this point, we hope that the user can focus on what he was looking for and hopefully make some purchase on your site, right? So after seeing how things work on surface, we may wonder, how did the Berry rule get applied to the original query exactly? So for rule types under applied rule stage, a rule needs to be triggered by the original query request in one of the 4 ways highlighted in the orange box on the left. I might need to add some separators, but they're basically 4 types. For example, you can have a date range for a rule to be triggered. Maybe you only want some rule to be in effect for the first 2 weeks of February. Or like the example we showed before, we can use a search term to be the trigger, right? And all of these triggers can be easily configured in the same UI when we create the rule. So after a rule is created, it will go to this additional Fusion collection, or here we refer to it as a sidecar collection. So rules will be stored in the sidecar collection in the form of Solr documents. So AKA, one rule is corresponding to one Solr document here. So when a rule is triggered, Fusion will go into the sidecar collection to retrieve the associated rule document. And then Fusion will do a series of transformation using the rule document onto the original query request. And then at the end, we will have a new query that is based on the applied buried rule in this example. All right. So now we can have a look at the before and after in terms of parameters. And let's focus on the Q parameter here. So on the left is before we applied the buried rule in the both example. And you can see the Q is just the simple search term both. And then after we applied the buried rule, now the Q parameter becomes this much longer string with more advanced query parser and query parameters, right? So all these complicated technical details are shielded from our business users. What they need to do is only to provide some basic information in the rule creating UI to create the rules. So applied rule stage focuses on pure business logic. When we look at text tagger stage, the general query rewriting concept is still pretty similar. However, if we think about the source of the rules here, it can be both from business logic, or it could be from the machine learning job outputs. So here's some background information. In a Fusion app, we have a separate collection to store search log, or here we refer to it as the signal data, or signals. So signal data carries really interesting information about how user interact with certain search results, or based on certain query requests historically, right? So it was very intuitive for us to treat the signal data as a source of natural language-based query rewriting items. So for this purpose, we developed a bunch of machine learning algorithms that discover things like synonyms, phrases, misspelling, or hat-tail pairs, right? So in this example, we have the synonym detection machine learning job. And each row in this screen represents a discovered synonym pair. And at this point, a business user can actually come in to add her own curation and either approve or deny the suggestions. And obviously, she can also manually create such synonym pair, maybe based on her specific business knowledge, right? Now, recall the scenario where the user put in the word apple in the hope to see Apple products. And also think about if your synonym detection job actually found a synonym pair that maps the word apple to the word Mac. And as a business user, you come in to approve this suggestion based on the business knowledge that most of the Apple product description in your listing have the word Mac in the description field, right? So at this point, how can we utilize such synonym rule? So after we apply the synonym rule here, you can see how the original user query Apple now is expanded to a two-term query, user query that has both the word Apple and Mac in it. So in this way, we're kind of trying to help the user to better translate his or her search intent or query intent. So similar to applied rule stage, the text tagger stage rules are also stored in the same sidecar collection. So for the text tagger stage, we actually use Solr's text tagger request handler, aka the name text tagger stage, to catch terms that could potentially match the query writing items or documents in the sidecar collection. And once such document is matched using the terms, the original query terms will be either expanded or replaced, depending on the rewriting policy. And then after that, a new query will be produced. Okay. So now that we saw a bunch of examples of how the Fusion Rules Engine works, I think it would be helpful for us to see how things are wired together as a whole from a higher level. So here I used two colors to represent the sources of rule data in Fusion. So green here represents rule data that comes from business logic implemented by the business users, right? And then on the bottom, the orange color represents rule data that is from machine learning job output, right? And all the rules, either created or generated here, are going to be put into the sidecar collection we just mentioned earlier, right? So here we designed the flow to have a staging sidecar collection. So from this point, the staging collection can actually work with a rule simulator UI that's on the upper right screen. So these two pieces work together as a sandbox environment. And the purpose is for the user to test the created rules to see if they work correctly. And once all the rules pass the test in the simulated environment, they can then be published to the actual production sidecar collection. And from that point, the production collection will interact with other production level, say, Fusion query pipelines, right? Okay, so the content we covered so far is around this one theme about how Fusion Rules Engine can make a business user's life easier, right? But you may say that I have a way more complicated use case or implementation case, or I'm actually pretty comfortable with more technical details. In that case, we have a rich set of API endpoint that covers all the rule management tasks, such as creating, updating, or publishing, etc. And you can use all these in the more complex technical integration, right? All right, so to summarize, so far we talked about how Fusion Rules Engine works, and we saw some examples, and we also took a look at how things are implemented on a higher level. And I hope the content we covered so far has given you an idea of how Fusion Rules Engine can be a good solution to speed up the business rule implementation. So as I'm wrapping up, I do want to spend a couple of minutes to talk about the areas that we want to focus in the future. So think about the applied rule stage. All the rule types are based on many, many discussions we had with our customers. And we want to continue such effort so that we keep taking the customer's feedback and then continuously to empower them with new rule types that align well with their business logic, right? And on the machine learning piece of the text tagger stage, we want to make sure that we always stay on the cutting edge of machine learning research. So if we see something that could be better used to assist Fusion to discover things like query writing items, say from the signal data, we would definitely want to look into that. And finally, we have been exploring knowledge base as another source for more natural language-based query writing items. So we will also continue the effort into that direction. Okay, so before I take any questions from you guys, there are a couple of things I would love to learn from you as well. And one thing is, obviously, at this point, I wonder how Fusion Rules Engine can solve your specific use cases. And another piece is, we've seen that e-commerce has been one area that we see Fusion Rules Engine plays a very significant role. But I always wonder what other areas can there be to have Fusion Rules Engine also be critical. So if you have any interesting idea around these topics, please feel free to connect with me after the session. And thank you again so much for joining me here, and I'll take some questions from you, if any. Sure. Okay, sure. Yeah.
One is one of the slides you showed where you had the trigger conditions. One was tags. And we've been playing around with tags and trying to figure out how they work. We couldn't get them to apply in 4.2.3. I think it's just me. The other question I have is also in the apply stage, you showed a slide where
maybe we can go back
the
to the
type was edismax, and then it swapped to Lucene.
Are
we
you
noticed that also, and we didn't know if that was like intended, and if it was intended, why it might be so.
Is that this
one here? Yes.
Okay.
So the default type. So you see there it's swapped, right?
Yeah. Okay, so the two questions are first, how exactly to use taggers as triggers? And then the next question is, how did we swap between Lucene and edismax as the parsers? Okay, so, we have this Fusion veteran here. Oh, by the way, this is my colleague Kiran. He's the tech lead of my team, and he's here to take tough questions.
So the first question, right? The tags. I think tags, there was a bug around in tags around 4.2 or 4.2.3 for your specific use case. I mean, if you're a customer, I would say file a support ticket. If you're from PS, I would say like work with us on finding the issue. I think we fixed issues around it in 4.2.3 and it should work. In the second use case, there is a fix coming in Fusion 4.2.4 where the default def type is always going to be Lucene, but we're going to have a subquery where the def type is going to be edismax. So all the edismax params get applied, so they don't get ignored. Let's say you have something like minimum match or things like that, then so the underlying query def type is going to be Lucene, but for the main query, we're going to wrap it around with edismax local param syntax, so that all the edismax params get applied. I think that's a bug that we fixed in 4.2.4.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is a workaround for the Lucene bug, just a few lines of JavaScript. If you get with me after, I can get your information and make sure you have it.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I go back to the tags one more time?
Yeah, let's see.
What would be the intention or usage? Do you have some use cases you could throw out? We're using it in a specific way, but I'm just curious what.
For like when we can use tags as a trigger?
As part of the conditions, right?
I can give a use case.
Yeah, Andrew here is the hero of our field for
Well,
rules
there's
engine.
two, right? There's a page grouping and a tags field.
And I'll speak to the tags. So both the rules and the tags are made for the UI. Shall I come?
Yeah.
Sure, take over the stage.
We get a lot of feedback from Andrew on how to improve this stuff for
Yeah,
us.
I have the fortune of working with some of the early adopters, and so I've tried to work through some of these cases. Both tags and grouping have a couple of areas where they're important. The first is the UI to give you a quick way to isolate sections of rules that you want to see, especially if you have one area that's working on one set of rules and 10,000 other ones that maybe even get machine generated that you don't want to see all the time. You need to have a way in the UI to filter those out so that analysts don't have to always work with it. Now, in the case of tags, if you set a tag, that gets saved in the rule body itself. You can then go to the query pipeline stage that ingests the rules, and there's a line there for additional query parameters. You can say, like, I can't remember the exact syntax. It's like tags colon, it's an FQ equals tags colon and the name of your tag, and that will filter the rules that you're looking for in that application down to just those tags. Pre-filter it before the trigger. So if you have one set of tags that's for your main query, another set of tags is, say, for autocomplete, another set of tags is for non-product or something like that. You name those tags, you have your rules, you have filters in each of those pipelines, and each pipeline gets the ones that they care about.
Yeah.
Nice.
Stay here.
I think
Here still.
yeah,
So,
just stay.
yeah. Any more questions? So basically, yeah, manage different pipelines and use the rules.
I have a different question.
You may want to
Are these rules,
you're out of the
so in our environment, we have multiple main collections. So for different clients, we have different collections. So can this rule apply to all collections, or is it applied to just a single collection at a time?
Currently, it's designed to apply for the main application. So basically, let's say, currently it's designed rules collections stay within the context of a Fusion app. So for every Fusion app, there is a query rewrite collection and there is a staging collection. And if you have multiple apps, then you can have a rules editor per app, and all these rules and the data inside these collections are kept isolated as well.
So for a business person, if let's say if you have to apply these rules and there are hundreds of rules, like is there a way to like easily copy these rules? Because for us, most of these rules kind of duplicate across the collections. But is there an easy way for copy around?
Or sharing a different app?
Right now, no. I would say they are kept isolated within an app, but we have a bulk upload API that you can use to upload it to the another app.
Is there a way to export and
Yes,
Yeah.
there is. We have a bulk API to export these ones.
You can also, within a Fusion stage that's in the query pipeline, you can reference
Yeah.
a different query rewrite collection. And that can be a reference that does cross the app. You share the app, or you share the collection across the apps, and then you have app 1, and maybe it needs to look at the collection from app 2 in order to.
there is a way that's possible.
And if you just want one query rewrite, everyone goes there, puts in their rules, and you have all the apps reference that one.
Is there a documentation around that to do how to do
The
that?
documentation, it's a combination of multiple features of Fusion. So Object Explorer documentation will show you how to share the collection, and then the query rewrite collection will show you how to reference a collection.
I got it. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that applies for the rules, maybe not for query rewrite stuff.
Well,
That applies for business rules.
the text tagger is still going to just query
The same sidecar
Same.
collection.
a collection, so you get the same.
Yeah. Any other question? We might have like 3-4 minutes left, so I see a question there.
Thank you. So, is the rules engine really just a way to circumvent managing the content, right? In your Barry example or in Boost example, business says, hey, my result that I want near the top is 10th. Can you just boost it to the top? Well, my response would be, can you just fix your content, right? So it ranks better. Are the rules a way to get around fixing the content?
The use cases for why you use a rule,
Yeah.
there are lots and lots and lots of them. And one of them may be our data's bad and we want to adjust it with a little boost. But another one may be we've got promotional items that are going on sale at 10 o'clock and we want to give them a boost. Well, that's not something that you fix the content
Right.
for, right? You also have cases where, if you're a big box retailer, the facets that you want to show for the lumber department are entirely different than what you want to show for paint. Paint you care about finish and composition, and lumber you care about dimension and type of,
Wood, yeah.
entirely different. So you want one set of facets when you're in one part of your site and another set of facets for another. That's not fixing the data so much as reacting to what the user is lurking for,
Yeah.
and the content.
Yeah, you're solving for context.
Also, if you want to change results based on seasons,
Right.
like
Right.
different results for summer or winter, right?
We have probably 1 minute left, so maybe that's the last question. But if you have more questions, feel free to come talk to us after this.
Hi, I have a specific question regarding recency versus relevancy. So currently we are using a boosting formula to boost all the recent documents. So I was wondering if we can use the rules engine stage where we can provide a negative boost to the documents which are like 6 months old or beyond 6 months old.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a typical
Because
use
of
case.
facet.
One of the stage types is just arbitrary parameters. And similar to the query pipeline additional parameter stage. And so you put your parameters in and you trigger the boost. Now, caveat, the future version of Solar does not support negative boost. So you may want to do a percentage boost, percentage less than 1.
Yeah.
Boost reduced to 10% of the score or reduced to 50% of the prior score rather than a subtraction.
Okay.
Just to future-proof your application.
All right, I think time is up now, and I'm sure you have to go to some other interesting sessions. And thank you guys so much again for joining us here.
I hope I didn't take over.
Thanks.